In this video, we take a look at how to use double-pointed needles. Stay with me and I'll show you how. Double-pointed needles are straight needles with, as the name suggests, a point at either end. Double-pointed needles are used for knitting in the round. They come in different sizes and lengths and usually come in groups of 4. These shorter sock needles come in a group of 5. I will be using this set of 5 sock needles to demonstrate, and before we cast on, we set aside one needle, which will be our working needle, and we will cast on to the remaining needles. We want to split our stitches evenly among our needles, so we work out how many stitches are in our piece, and if we're working with a set of 5 needles like I am, we divide that number by 4. If you're working with a set of 4 needles, you divide that by 3. But to make things easy, I'm going to cast on 40 stitches, and onto 4 needles, that's 10 stitches on each needle. For this demonstration, I'm using a long tail cast on. This first loop with the slip knot counts as the first stitch, so I cast on 9 more. Now with my 10 stitches on my first needle, I bring in my second needle and I cast the next stitch onto this needle. You may find this a little awkward at first, it just takes some practice. And make sure you pull the yarn snug so that the needles are tightly together and there's no gaps between. And for now we just let that first needle hang there and carry on casting our 10 stitches onto the second needle. We have our 10 stitches cast on needle number 2. We bring in our next needle and we do the same again. We let the first 2 needles just hang around and we cast on the next stitch onto our third needle. Pull the yarn snug to make sure that the needles are pulled together and we carry on casting our 10 stitches. And let's see that one more time. We take our final needle, let the previous needles just hang around and cast on onto the new needle. Pull it snug so the 2 needles are close together and carry on casting on until all our stitches are on the needle. Now all our stitches are cast on, we make sure that our stitches are untwisted and we bring our needles into a circle. The needle with the working thread coming off we hold in our dominant hand. I refer to this as needle A, and the end of the stitches in the other hand. I refer to this as needle B. We hold those 2 needles together, and now we bring in our working needle, and we come into this first stitch on needle B, and needles A and B are crossed over the top of the working needle. We take hold of the yarn on needle A, and we wrap it around our working needle. And we pull that through the loop on needle B and pull it off the needle. And we pull the yarn as tight as we can to keep the working needle and needle A snug together to avoid a large gap. And we carry on knitting as normal. And when all of the stitches are knitted off, this then becomes the working needle. And we move on to the next needle. This then becomes needle B. We take hold of the yarn on needle A and we wrap it around our working needle. Pull that through the loop on needle B and pull it off the needle. And each time we change the needle, we give the yarn a little tug to make sure that the needles are snug together to avoid any gaps. And we carry on knitting as normal. And when all stitches are knitted off the next needle, that becomes our working needle. And we move on to the next, knitting our stitch and pulling it snug to avoid gaps. and we carry on along the round until we reach our tail. And now we've come to our tail, which is the end of our round, and we're ready to start our next. If you watched my last video about circular needles, you'll remember that when we knit in the round, we're always knitting on the front side of our work. I'm working in a stocking stitch. With a stocking stitch, we always knit on the front side, so I continue knitting all the way around. To start our next round, we hold needle A and B together. We take our working needle, and we come into this first stitch on needle B. Pick up the yarn on needle A and wrap it around the working needle. Pull that through the loop on needle B. Give the yarn a tug, and we carry on knitting as normal, working our way across the next needle. And when all the stitches come off the needle, that becomes our working needle. We move on to the next needle, pulling the stitches snug to avoid gaps, and carry on knitting along the round until we come back to our tail. And we've reached our tail again, which means we're at the end of our round. But as we knit further along and further away from our tail, it might become harder to keep track of our rounds. So we can use a stitch marker. On circular needles, I normally put this between the first and last stitch, but that won't work on double pointed needles because it would just slide off. So I normally knit the first stitch and place the marker just after the first stitch, and that just lets me know that I've reached the end of the round and I'm about to start another. So let's do our first stitch of the next round. We take our working needle and go through the first stitch on needle B. We pick up the working yarn on needle A and wrap it around the working needle and pull it through the loop on needle B. And our first stitch is on. Now we can place our stitch marker and we can continue knitting along the round. And when we come to our stitch marker, we know we're about to start our next round. We knit the first stitch, slip the stitch marker, and we carry on knitting along the round. Don't worry if you find this all a little bit fiddly, especially for the first couple of rows. You will find that this all becomes easier with practice. And we just keep knitting our rounds until we reach our desired lengths. And that's how to use double pointed needles.